Welcome to the Coaching Game. I'm Laurie Lawson, and tonight my guest is Alfredo Carrasquillo. I hope I did. Is that your name really, or am I making a name up? Is that how you pronounce
No,
it?
that's my name. Yes, you
Beautiful.
got it right.
Okay. And I'm making an exception tonight because I don't usually read, but this gentleman has, in addition to being an executive coach and a psychoanalyst and an organizational development consultant, he's got some credentials that I want to tell you about. In 1999, he was selected by the International Development Conference, the James P. Grant Trust, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank as one of the 60 leading young social entrepreneurs in the world, becoming the sole Caribbean member of the Common Futures Forum. Now that's impressive, but here's more. In 2007, he was selected one of the 10 members of the top 10 management for Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, a selection made by top 10 management Spain of the 10 most distinguished management consultants in the Caribbean region. Now, okay, so I want to know, I'm thrilled to have you here, Alfredo, for sure. I'm very impressed, and it's like we're all thrilled with that. But I want to know, how'd you get to be a coach, for God's sake? You have all these credentials starting way back when. A coach, how'd you do that? What are you doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, Laurie. I'm very happy to be here with your audience. Actually, it was an accident and not a pretty one because I originally planned when I was in college, I decided I wanted to be a psychoanalyst, education which I completed, and I was in fact practicing psychoanalyst for 20 years. But at that time, I decided I was coming back from a year studying abroad in Spain as part of my undergraduate studies. And I decided to go to Mexico City to become a psychoanalyst. And about 8 months after being in Mexico studying, I was kidnapped. So I couldn't stay in Mexico for security reasons. Luckily, I survived that traumatic and terrible experience. I was able to come back to Puerto Rico. But it was in the middle of the fall semester, so there was no way for me to restart my studies somewhere else. I had to wait until the next semester or next year. So I decided to start doing some volunteering work here in Puerto Rico. And they told me, well, if you are training as a psychoanalyst, I'm sure you know how to listen to other people. So in some nonprofit organizations that I went to do some volunteer work, they told me, why don't you listen to these groups of people? They are doing some community work or they are trying to work together and they are having some trouble getting along and working together. So there I went to listen to them, which was what I knew how to do. And I discovered a fascinating opportunity of listening to people, intervening, and being able to facilitate new types of conversations. I thought I was discovering a new ocean, a new continent, to learn later on very humbly that this was a whole field, the psychoanalytic study of groups and organizations. I decided to continue my studies in graduate and doctoral studies in the US. And as part of that, I had a great doctoral studies classmate, Barbara Braham, who used to be an executive coach in Columbus, Ohio. So she told me, well, that interest of yours in putting together psychoanalysis and the work or the study of groups and organizations and leadership, that connects quite well to the field of executive coaching and particularly ontological coaching. So for me, that was a discovery. I ended up using my internship in my doctoral program to do my coaching certification. So I ended up becoming a coach as well as a psychoanalyst and working in organizations for 24 years now. So I have to say, paradoxically, that I have to thank a couple of kidnappers for allowing me to become a coach many years after.
Wow. I think there's a book in the making there. You may want to consider that. That's an amazing journey, and we don't even know the details, and I'm fascinated. So I think that's great, and really what we're going to talk about, because we're closing out one crazy year here, and hopefully moving into tranquility of some sort, is silver linings and possibilities, and we've got, all kinds of crazy things going on. But tell me, what are you doing right now? I know you've taken all this experience. What are you doing with this coaching and your life experience and your entrepreneurial experience? And what are you doing with that right now?
Actually, it's interesting the connection between this question and the previous one,
Mhm.
because if there's something that I learned out of that experience of being kidnapped and my life becoming totally upside down and interrupted at that juncture, was that you have two options. Basically, the option of becoming a victim of your circumstances and doing nothing and waiting for a savior, someone to come to rescue you, or taking charge of your life and using or identifying the adequate attitude to deal with external circumstances that you truly cannot control. And that's in part what coaching is about, facilitating conversations with leaders, managers, business teams, which is what I do. Yeah, we have a pandemic, we have an incredible disruption of business life. Are we gonna lament or are we gonna do something? Are we gonna decide what our attitude would be to confront this situation? So basically, I'm pretty busy helping leaders and teams identifying the new strategies and the adequate way of being leaders for things which are comprehensively filled with uncertainty and scared and concerned, and how leaders can actually be, I always say, like flight attendants. When you're in a very long flight, I used to travel many years to South Africa, which is an incredibly long flight. And when you're in the middle of nowhere, traveling between continents, and there's a noise in the cabin, what you do is that you look at flight attendants. And if they are chilling, fine, serving wine, you keep reading or sleeping or watching a movie. But one day I was traveling to Johannesburg and there was a very nasty sound in the cabin, and I looked at the flight attendants, and they were incredibly scared. I got scared as well, and I shared you this idea, this metaphor, because basically leaders nowadays, in the middle of this disruption of this pandemic, are like flight attendants. Members of their teams will be looking at them to find some solace, some calmness, and understand that, yeah, this is a difficult juncture, but there's hope. And 2021, or at some point sooner than later, this will end up, it will be a new normal, but we're moving into a more a stable scenario, and we have to get ready for that. So I'm quite busy in helping people and teams learn how to cope with this disruption, which is complicated.
I love the analogy, leaders are flight attendants. That's pretty good. I know you have a philosophy of the democracy of, I'm going to go with the long word, the democracy of leadership. That is coming on now. Where did you come up with that idea? Because that is, people are slowly moving over to that now. How long have you been, I won't say preaching, how long have you been practicing that philosophy?
Yeah, well, in 1998, I had the opportunity to do an international research fellowship at the Kettering Foundation in Dayton, Ohio, which is an organization that works on how to promote democratic practices in the US and across the world. And some of the things that I learned there was certain methodologies and tools you can use to facilitate community groups conversations, communication and dialogues among citizens. And basically, the principle behind that is that politics is way too important to leave to politicians. Politics is citizens' business. We have to get back into politics. And by that, I'm not talking about party politics. I'm talking about understanding our responsibilities as citizens in what is happening in our cities and in our countries nowadays. and understanding that representative democracy no longer works, if it ever did, and that we have to get or develop, establish some practices of what we call participatory democracy, how citizens can come back and inform public servants, which are basically our employees, what's the agenda that we together want to establish. And by learning out of those experiences and working with some politicians who have understood that and have developed democratic and participatory ways of governance, I have understood that that's incredibly powerful also for businesses, because usually it's at the level of the board of directors or the executive leadership team that strategic decisions are made. But then the deployment of those strategies to the whole team are limited, and people are not that engaged and do not, there's no clear buy-in on those strategies. But if instead you make those strategic planning processes, for example, participatory ones, you give an opportunity for everyone in the team to have a say. Of course, at the end, directors and owners or whatever will end up making the decisions. But if members of a team end up seeing that their voices are included in the strategy, the engagement is almost immediate, and the connection to making that happen is very powerful. So yes, businesses are not democracies, and they should not be necessarily, because there is a direction that is needed to produce results, but participation is incredibly powerful for making things happen and for engagement. So that has been somehow my philosophy and what I have been trying to facilitate in many organizational settings.
Bless you. Every 4 years or so, politicians in the United States will pull out the trickle down theory, and usually in an attempt to get breaks for the higher up people, and it never works. And it's been proven that it doesn't work. So are you finding that companies are less resistant to the idea of trickle up theory, or are you going in and showing them this could work, or is it a combination of both?
There was perhaps some resistance before, but now with the generational changes, new generations coming into the workplace, people, the new groups, young people, are not planning to stay forever in an organization. They require many things from those organizations, and part of what they require to be engaged is a connection to the mission, to purpose, and that they have an opportunity there to create and to innovate and to have initiative. And usually, uh, leadership styles from the past no longer work, and those things have to change. On the other side, all the Black Lives Matters movement, all the diversity issues that are so central now, actually require new conversations in organizational settings from board of directors down. And those elements of this particular historic juncture is convincing leaders that they have to organize things differently, and that people, human capital, human talent, people in organizations, they are the ones who have the knowledge. They are the ones who serve clients. They are the ones who know what needs to be done. So why, instead of giving them instructions, give them space to be part of the collective creation process? And that's way too powerful for leaders to not to consider, especially when they begin to see the results.
Well, I was hoping, and we can talk about blessings of the pandemic, because there are a few. I was hoping that one blessing of the pandemic would be, okay, we termed essential workers. And they were not the people that were getting the big salaries. They were not the people that were necessarily making heavy duty decisions. They were the people who were providing services that you and I need in order to survive. And I'm hoping that that will push what you're practicing over the edge there. I know you've done both. Is there a difference between coaching and leadership in Puerto Rico and coaching and leadership in the States?
Um, yes and no. I would say that not really, that leadership and leadership challenges are the same. all over the world. I have had the privilege of working in 13 different countries with leaders from many different cultural backgrounds. And of course, there are cultural differences. The way people address, for example, crucial conversations, ways of handling authority, inspiration. There are many elements which are central to the exercise of leadership that are definitely different when there's a leader in Germany or a leader in Argentina or a leader in the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico or the United States. Yes, there are differences, but at the same time, today leadership teams are so multicultural, and we have leaders who might be in New York now, but tomorrow will be in Singapore, and next year will be in Indonesia. That leaders have to prepare themselves to be truly global leaders and to be able to have the cultural intelligence to deal with people from different cultural backgrounds. In that sense, uh, leaders will no longer be working their whole life in a single cultural context, and they have to equip themselves for that challenge.
That's interesting. And they're not necessarily going to be jumping on a plane, but they are Zoom. I mean, you and I are together because of Zoom. When we first met, you were in Puerto Rico and I was in New York City. And I said, oh, well, if you ever come to New York City, we'll tape a show. And then so I
Uh-huh.
said, we can do radio. And then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, my studio's closed down. So I can tape from a whole location and we can Zoom. So that is, you're right. The global expansion is happening, whether you're on a plane or whether a bus or you're sitting in your home. What challenges do you see for the future for as far as leadership styles and also just doing regular business, doing everyday business?
Yeah, I think that paradoxically, even with all its how it has hurt business and human beings and how many people have died and all the tragic consequences of the pandemic, at the same time, paradoxically, it has been a blessing because it has forced us to move ahead and to speed up certain processes that were needed. Processes of, for example, digitalization, of valuing remote work and work from home that for some organizations was a given many, many years ago, but other organizations were resistant that. And even when, yes, there are challenges in terms of the amount of work and the need to actually and the right to disconnect, people are valuing the opportunity to be at home, not having to commute all those hours of commuting. Organizational processes are being in many cases more agile. People are more efficient. The results are the same or even better. But there are also challenges in terms of the consequences of not being physically together and what it implies for teamwork and team integration and the implications it has in having the informal conversations that prompt or produce innovations and new ideas. So we have other opportunities. We are not going back to the normal that was before. That will not come back, especially because many organizations will redesign or reinvent or reimagine their office spaces, their ways of working, their practices. Big cities and big metropolitan and urban areas probably will not be as crowded because people can now work from many other places. This is a major shift. This is a major shift for organizations, and also is a major shift in moving from analog to digital and how practices, business practices, commercial exchanges will change. So once this emergency is over, a new world will grow, and that, of course, will require new leadership styles and new ways and new learnings for groups to work together. So we as coaches are going to be quite busy.
Here's hoping, yes. So what should leaders be doing now in order to get ready for the shift? I mean, the shift is here, but the bigger shift even. What should leadership be doing now?
I would say two things. One thing is that they have to be making sure that their organizations actually survive, that they are able to cope with the challenges and the emergency. that they are there taking care of themselves, but especially taking care of their people, making sure that their people are safe and that they are being flexible to handle the challenges of employees being at home with small kids or grown-up adults under their care, all the complexities of keeping some sort of a balance between life and family and work, which is quite difficult in this particular juncture. Handling all those elements to make sure that we can end up surviving the 2020 that it's almost done in a couple of days, and what will come after. But also, they should be in a process, in a continuous conversation with their teams of scenario planning, of scenario building. What would be the scenarios for the future once this is over? How do we have to transform our business models as to be able to differentiate ourselves and be successful in the new reality? But I say scenario building because we are not quite clear about what that new reality will be. So if this happens, we have to be ready. If this happens, we have to be ready. But if that happens, then we have to be ready as well. And make sure that the group is able to respond fast to those new scenarios once they come up. Those are, I would say, the biggest challenges of leaders nowadays.
If there's one thing we learned, it's that change is inevitable. We always said it, but we really didn't know what it meant. And it's like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, change. And that you really, and it's sad to say, I don't want to discourage planning for the future, but I think you have to plan with flexibility. You have to be able to shift. You have to be able to shift and just go with whatever's going on. And what role do you see um, the teams doing in that scenario, in all the scenarios? I mean, I know you think they should be inclusive, but maybe how inclusive? How much should they be involved in this whole thing?
Yeah, I agree with you that openness to change and flexibility today is incredibly important. Leaders can no longer be stubborn. They have to be persistent and they have to show tenacity, but that doesn't mean that they have to be inflexible. They have to be open to other ideas. They have to be listeners way more than preachers today. And because there's value and there's intelligence and there are wonderful ideas in their teams, and they have to be open to listen to that. And why teams are important and why diverse teams, I'm convinced, are important. Not because we have to be politically correct and say diversity is good and blah blah. No, diversity is incredibly rich for organizations because when you have a very diverse team, they will produce way much better ideas. You have different perspectives, different people coming from different backgrounds, from different realities. So they are different observers of reality. They see things from different perspectives. Yes, diverse teams take longer to make decisions, have more complicated conversations, and sometimes leaders hate that because think they want to be efficient. But sometimes efficiency comes at a cost of losing the capacity to innovate and the richness of teams. So diverse teams take longer to reach agreements. Once they are reached, they are way more powerful, and there teams have an opportunity. But teams have to reinvent their practices as to be able to sustain a sense of of belonging, of collaboration in a remote fashion. That the power of we cannot be dependent from now on being physically together in the same place or in an office. We have to identify and develop new habits and practices to sustain the power of we, even if we are across the world in different places.
I love that, redefining the power of we, because how do you stay connected remotely? And I think that might be the biggest challenge. Oh, you touched on it also. I was just in a webinar of some kind where multi-generational. their definition of power is different, you know, from baby boomers to Gen X's and so that it's so interesting that that can also be influenced because, you know, where we're thinking, oh, of course, the boss knows everything. You're right. The people, the young folks are coming in going, "Nah, I know as much as you do. Why are you telling me what to do?" So diversity is the name of the game, but not, you're right, not for politically correct reasons, but for just for the richness of it all. And for people who don't want that, it's just kind of, I find it bewildering and a little bit of sad also. Um, we've got like 2.5 minutes going on. What are some of the blessings that you see from this pandemic?
I would say the opportunity for leaders to become better human beings in serving and taking care of their people. That supervisors, managers, and leaders have been able to get to know their employees better. Now they know they have people who have kids with disabilities or who are taking care of a father or mother with Alzheimer or have in their house a brother or a sister who's handicapped and understanding that human dimension of people who work with them, being sensible and showing empathy for that has been a blessing because it has transformed the way people relate among themselves. And what you mentioned, I would say is the other thing. We are valuing much more today the role of those essential workers and the importance of being fair and providing them what they need and changing our practices of solidarity and respect for those groups. So in many ways, I think 2021, almost there, will be a better year. Probably by the summer, this whole process should be over. And I hope we will not forget everything that this experience has uh, provided us the opportunity to learn.
Definitely. And death has a way of doing that. And Lord knows we've seen enough this year of making you start getting your priorities kind of in order. You know, it's like, what I was really worried about, no longer. And let me stay connected. Let me talk to loved ones. Let me do what's important. Let me do work that's important. You know, I'm sure people are considering that. Let me do work that's going to make me happy as opposed to I'll do it in 10 years. And
Yes.
nothing's guaranteed anymore. And that's a nice feeling. I'm going to say that you are a blessing of the pandemic because we're getting to have this show. And I'm so thrilled about that. How can people get in touch with you? Because you are so fascinating. How can people get in touch with you?
Oh, well, my name is right there, Alfredo Carrasquillo. So either on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all the social
Terrific.
media, they can find under my name, and I'll be happy to connect and answer any questions. And a happy New Year to everyone.
Well, I'm glad you're not hiding because I'm sure people are going to be looking you up. And I know I'm going to we will stay in touch. Thank you so much for doing this. You are a shining example of how we can overcome all of the things that are going on in the world today. So thank you, Alfredo. I wish you a lovely new year, and we will be talking in 2021.
Thank you, and happy New Year. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.